You've been lied to about intelligence. They told you that learning fast is a gift, a lucky draw in the genetic lottery. If you don't get it instantly, you must not be smart enough. None of this is true. Here's the real pain. You sit with a textbook, stare at the same paragraph, and nothing clicks. Someone next to you breezes through it. The frustration burns. Why can't I learn like that? Let's expose the myth. Speed is not intelligence. Picture two people trying to solve a maze. One sprints blindly ahead, hitting dead ends. The other walks, pausing at every intersection, noticing patterns, mapping the territory. The sprinter might look faster, but who actually reaches the exit first? More importantly, who understands the maze? Schools reward the sprinter. Exams are built for speed, not for depth. You're measured by how quickly you regurgitate, not by how deeply you understand. The result? You internalize a lie. That slow means stupid. That confusion is failure. But confusion is not a bug in learning. It's the signal that you've hit the edge of your understanding, the point where real growth happens. Here's the trap. You start hiding your confusion. You memorize answers, copy formulas, and hope nobody notices the gaps. You become a master of naming things, throwing fancy words around instead of truly understanding them. Feynman called this cargo cult learning, mimicking the appearance of knowledge, missing the substance entirely. But let's get even more honest. Think about how you actually feel when you don't get something right away. Embarrassed, ashamed, maybe even angry. You compare yourself to others, thinking they're just built differently. But what if the difference isn't in their brains, but in their approach? What if the real difference is that they don't panic when they're lost, they get curious? Imagine learning as building a bridge over a river. Most people try to sprint across, hoping the planks hold. The ones who really learn stop at every gap, test the wood, reinforce the weak spots. Yes, it takes longer, but when the storm comes, their bridge stands, yours collapses. The irony? The slow builder ends up moving faster in the long run because they don't have to keep rebuilding from scratch. So the pain isn't just that you don't learn fast. The pain is that you believe you never will. That belief is the real prison. But here's the twist, and it's the first epiphany. The fastest learners are not the smartest. They're the most honest about what they don't understand. They use confusion as a compass, not a curse. They don't hide from the fog, they map it. If you want to join the minority who study to understand, not just to pass exams, subscribe now. The next block will shatter the illusion even further. Richard Feynman never confused speed with depth. Picture this, a crowded lecture hall at Princeton, 1940s. Everyone scribbles furiously, desperate to keep up. Feynman sits back, eyes half closed, not writing a word. To an outsider, he might look lazy or clueless. But here's the twist. While others obsess over copying information, Feynman is turning ideas over in his mind, searching for meaning, not memorization. He's not racing to the finish, he's mapping the territory. He once told a story about fixing radios as a boy. He wasn't the fastest. Other kids swapped parts blindly, hoping to stumble on a fix. Feynman stared at the circuits, asked odd questions, poked places that didn't make sense. He didn't just want to know which wire was broken. He wanted to know why the radio ever worked in the first place. That's where the real advantage started. He saw every malfunction as a clue, not a setback. The process was never about speed. It was about seeing the invisible gears turning beneath the surface. Imagine learning as cracking open a safe. Most people spin the dial quickly, hoping luck opens the door. Feynman, though, listens for the subtle clicks, the tiny hints. He's patient. He knows the right question, not the right answer, is what moves you forward. The world is full of people spinning dials, mistaking noise for progress. Feynman's method is different. He waits, he listens, he investigates. He's not afraid to look slow if it means he'll understand what others miss. This wasn't about innate genius. It was about refusing to play the same game as everyone else. Feynman didn't care if he looked slow or if people called him weird. He cared about seeing the machinery behind the curtain. That's what made him dangerous, and why, when a problem looked unsolvable, others turned to him. He was the one who could see the flaw in the foundation, not just the cracks in the wall. Here's the error everyone commits: assuming quick recall means real understanding. Feynman would call this cargo cult learning, imitating the surface, missing the substance. He said, "You must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." Most people are content to recite definitions, pass tests, and move on. Feynman wanted to know if he could explain it to a child, or better yet, to himself, in plain language. If he couldn't, he knew he didn't really understand it yet. So next time you're tempted to measure progress by how fast you finish a chapter, remember the safe. Are you spinning dials or listening for the truth inside? Are you chasing the illusion of intelligence or doing the hard, slow work of building it for real? The world prizes fast talkers and quick hands. Feynman prized the person who could sit quietly, stare deeper, and see the flaw nobody else bothers to find. That's the real mark of intelligence, not speed, but the courage to slow down and ask a better question. In the end, it's not about how quickly you move through the material, but how deeply the material moves through you. You sit with a textbook, eyes sliding across the page, convinced that reading faster means learning faster. But your brain isn't a photocopier. It's more like a messy workbench, filled with loose screws, scattered wires, and half-built machines. The traditional method tells you to stack information neatly, one fact after another. But neuroscience shows this is a myth. Your memory isn't a shelf, it's a network, constantly rewiring, pruning, and reconnecting in response to how you engage with ideas. Here's the trap. Cramming facts lights up the short-term memory, but those connections are brittle. They snap under pressure. You memorize dates, formulas, buzzwords, but ask yourself to explain, really explain what's happening, and you hit a wall of fog. That's because your brain never built the sturdy bridges between ideas. It settled for snapshots, not blueprints. You end up with a pile of puzzle pieces, but no picture. Imagine trying to assemble a car by just remembering the names of the parts. You know there's an engine, a crankshaft, a battery, but can you connect them? Can you make it run? That's the flaw in traditional learning. It's obsessed with surface speed and ignores structural depth. The education system rewards you for how many parts you can name, not whether you can make the engine turn over. Feynman saw this everywhere. Students panicking before exams, racing to memorize, confusing speed with insight. Science backs him up. When you rush, your hippocampus, the brain's memory architect, can't process patterns. It's like scribbling on a foggy window. You see outlines, but the picture never comes into focus. Real understanding demands you slow down, let neurons reshape, allow patterns to settle. The brain needs time to consolidate, to move information from the fragile short-term store to the robust long-term network. That doesn't happen at sprint speed. But here's the error everyone makes. You think confusion is a sign of low intelligence. Feynman called this out as nonsense. Confusion means your brain is wrestling with the material, struggling to make sense, forging connections. If you never feel lost, you're not learning, you're reciting. The discomfort is the signal that your brain is doing the real work, breaking old patterns, building new ones, testing the strength of your understanding. The traditional system punishes confusion and rewards parroting. That's why most people forget everything after the test. The biological design of your brain isn't built for memorizing lists. It's built for building models, and that takes time, deliberate struggle, and the guts to admit, I don't get it yet. Here's the twist. The more you chase speed, the less you retain. The more you embrace the slow, sometimes painful process of connecting ideas, the faster you actually learn in the long run. Feynman knew that the mind, like a muscle, grows through resistance, not through mindless repetition. The next time you feel stuck, remember, that's not failure, that's the beginning of real intelligence. But here's the error that traps almost everyone. You think you've understood something the moment you can name it. You pass the test, recite the definition, maybe even solve a problem or two, and call it mastery. But Feynman saw through this illusion. To him, knowing the name of a thing and truly understanding it were opposites. Picture a mechanic who can recite every part of an engine but can't fix a broken car. That's what most learning looks like. You collect labels, not insight. Feynman called this the disease of nominal knowledge. Why does this distinction matter? Because your brain isn't a filing cabinet, it's a living network of connections. When you just memorize names, you build isolated nodes. But when you understand, you wire those nodes together. Real learning is the spark that jumps between them. That's why someone with less raw intelligence but deeper connections outpaces the so-called genius who just memorizes facts. Feynman's principle was brutal in its simplicity. If you can't explain it to a child, you don't understand it. This isn't dumbing down. It's distilling complexity into clarity. You must be able to break concepts apart, connect them to what you already know, and reconstruct them in your own words. Anything less is smoke and mirrors. What's the mechanism? When you struggle to explain, your brain is forced to confront gaps. That discomfort is diagnostic. It's not a weakness. It's the signpost to real understanding. Every time you hit a wall, you've located the precise spot your knowledge is thin. That's not a stopping point. That's your launch pad. But here's where most people get it wrong again. They avoid the discomfort. They rush to the answer key, or memorize a summary, or tell themselves they get it because they've seen it before. Feynman never did that. He hunted the discomfort. He knew that the moment you feel confused is the moment your brain is about to grow. Confusion is not a bug, it's a feature. It's the friction that forges new connections. Imagine your mind as a city at night. Memorization lights up isolated buildings. Understanding turns on the streetlights between them. Suddenly you see the pathways. You can travel, improvise, solve problems in new ways. That's why Feynman could leap from physics to biology to safecracking. He didn't just know facts, he saw the architecture. So the core principle? Speed is irrelevant. Intelligence is irrelevant. What matters is the depth and architecture of your connections, the difference between naming and knowing. Feynman built his mind like a city, not a warehouse. And that's the first principle that changes everything. Here's the blueprint Feynman used, and you can too. Strip away all decoration. Take the idea you're learning and explain it to an empty chair, as if it's a stubborn, skeptical child. No jargon, no shortcuts. If you stumble, that's not a failure, that's the signal. Feynman called these stumbles the clues to confusion. Picture the idea as a tangled ball of string. Most people yank at it, hoping it'll unravel by force. Feynman started at the knots, slowly, deliberately, asking, why is this here? What does this part actually do? Each knot is a question mark. You don't move on until you've untied it. That's understanding. If you can't do this, you don't know it. Simple. Write down everything in your own words. Draw it, map it, argue with it. Each gap you find isn't a weakness, it's a gold mine. Feynman hunted for these gaps obsessively. He'd circle them, poke them, refuse to move on until the fog cleared. His notebooks were filled with brutally honest scribbles. I don't get this, nonsense, why? Because he wasn't interested in looking smart. He was obsessed with clarity. Here's the process step by step. 1. Pick the concept. Break it into pieces. Don't just accept the textbook structure, rebuild it from the ground up. 2. Teach it aloud, simply. No hiding behind big words. Imagine you're explaining gravity to a 5-year-old. If you can't, you don't understand it. 3. When you hit confusion, pause. That's the gap. Go back, dig in, research, rebuild the idea from scratch. Don't gloss over it. Don't move on because you're bored or embarrassed. That's the moment your brain is begging for real learning. 4. Repeat until you can't find a knot. When every part feels obvious, you're done. But here's the error everyone makes. They mistake speed for depth. They race ahead, pile up facts, and call it knowledge. Feynman moved at the speed of clarity. He didn't care if it took 5 minutes or 5 days. The goal wasn't to finish fast, it was to finish right. And here's the visual. Imagine building a bridge. Most people lay planks as fast as they can, hoping it holds. Feynman hammered every nail, tested every joint, walked across it himself before letting anyone else. That's why his bridges never collapsed. This is how you turn the first principle into muscle memory. Not by memorizing, but by relentlessly untangling every knot until the idea stands naked, utterly obvious in your mind. You don't just know the name of the thing, you know the thing itself. That's the Feynman difference. If you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, try this method tonight. Pick any topic you think you know. Explain it, knot by knot. You'll be shocked at how many threads you've never pulled. But that's not a flaw. That's the beginning of real intelligence. The courage to slow down, to question, to rebuild. That's how you learn fast, by refusing to pretend you already know. But here's the pitfall almost everyone falls into. Your own mind fights back. As soon as you hit a gap, something you can't explain, your ego starts whispering, "Skip it. It's not important. You're smart enough." Think of your brain as a dark room. The Feynman technique is a flashlight, exposing dust in the corners. Most people panic when they see the dust. They'd rather switch off the light than admit the mess. That's intellectual laziness, the urge to hide ignorance under the rug of memorized terms. Your mind craves the comfort of certainty, even if it's fake. Feynman called this self-deception the most dangerous enemy of knowledge. He watched students recite beautiful equations, terrified to admit they had no idea what those symbols meant. He saw scientists bluffing their way through lectures, hoping no one would probe too deep. He refused to join this theater. He became obsessed with catching his own ignorance, not hiding it. But your ego hates this. It's wired to protect you from embarrassment, not from error. So when you stumble, you feel a sting. Shame, impatience, fear of looking slow. Here's the paradox. That sting is the sign you're on the right path. The discomfort means you've found real ignorance, not its polished mask. That's the goldmine. Most people run from that discomfort. They chase the illusion of speed. They copy notes, underline, highlight, fill their minds with colored dust. But ask them to teach, and the illusion vanishes. The dust settles, and all that's left is the empty room. You can't outsmart this obstacle with tricks. You have to stare your ignorance in the face, over and over. That's the discipline. Not speed, not intelligence, just radical honesty. And if you train that muscle, learning fast becomes a byproduct, not a goal. But here's the error everyone makes. They confuse feeling smart with being smart. The moment you gloss over a gap, you reinforce a habit, dodging discomfort. That habit is the true enemy. It's like painting over rust. The surface looks fine, but the structure is rotting. Feynman never let himself get away with that. He'd say, "I don't know," more than anyone else in the room. Not because he was less intelligent, but because he was less afraid. There's another trap, comparing your progress to others. You see someone racing ahead, reciting facts, and you feel slow. But speed is a mirage if you're running in circles. Feynman's genius wasn't in how fast he learned, but in how deeply he understood. He'd spend hours on a single concept, poking, prodding, turning it over until it was crystal clear. That's not slow, that's surgical. The real obstacle is inside you, the voice that says, "Move on, you've done enough." Ignore it. Stay with the discomfort. Dig until you hit bedrock. That's where learning accelerates, not at the surface, but at the roots. Most never get there because they're addicted to the feeling of progress, not the substance. So next time you feel that sting of confusion, don't flinch. That's your signal. That's your advantage. The people who learn fastest are the ones who are willing to look stupid for a moment so they can be brilliant for a lifetime. The hidden enemy isn't lack of intelligence, it's the refusal to see your blind spots. The day you welcome that discomfort is the day your learning accelerates. Here's the mind shift. This isn't just about studying science or passing exams. The mechanism Feynman used, turning confusion into curiosity, making uncertainty your compass, applies everywhere. The same brain that learns quantum mechanics is the brain you use to navigate relationships, careers, or even your own habits. If you only memorize, you build a wall between you and the world. But if you question, break down, and rebuild brick by brick, you create a bridge. Picture a mechanic who doesn't just swap parts, but understands the engine's logic. When something sputters, they don't panic. They diagnose, test, and learn. Feynman approached life this way. He didn't just accept what was handed to him. He poked, prodded, and played with ideas until he could see the gears turning underneath. That's why his method wasn't just for physics. It was a blueprint for understanding anything. Think about a tough conversation at work or trying to master a new skill. Most people freeze, hoping to fake it till they make it. Feynman did the opposite. He exposed his ignorance, then dissected it until it vanished. He didn't worship complexity. He hunted for the simple core that makes sense of the chaos. That's why his thinking worked not just in science, but in everything. He saw every confusion as a signpost, not a dead end. But here's the error everyone makes. They believe this clarity is unteachable, that it's mystical. It's not. It's a learned habit of refusing to stop at confusion, of interrogating your own mind until the fog lifts. This is how you break free from being a passive absorber to an active constructor of reality. Feynman called it the joy of finding things out. It's not reserved for Nobel laureates. It's available to anyone who's willing to look foolish in pursuit of truth. Let's make this visual. Imagine you're standing in a dense forest, lost. Most people wait for someone to hand them a map. Feynman would start climbing trees, mapping the terrain himself, even if he fell a few times. Each scratch, each wrong turn made his map clearer. That's the universal law. The fastest learners in any field are those who see gaps as opportunities, not as threats. It's not about intelligence. It's about relentless curiosity and the courage to confront what you don't know, over and over. In science, in art, in life itself. So, whether you're decoding a formula, learning a language, or figuring out why you keep repeating the same mistake in your relationships, the principle is the same. Don't settle for labels or surface answers. Dig, question, rebuild. The more you practice this, the more you realize learning fast isn't a gift, it's a discipline. It's a way of seeing the world that turns every unknown into an invitation, not a verdict. That's the Feynman shift. Here's the mind shift. Stop asking, am I smart enough? And start asking, how can I make the problem clearer? Intelligence is not the fuel. It's not even the engine. It's the clarity of your mental wiring that matters. How you connect the pieces. How you question. How you refuse to fake understanding. Picture a mechanic who doesn't just swap parts when a car sputters. He diagrams the entire system. He traces every wire, every bolt, until the cause becomes obvious. That's real mastery. You too can become that mechanic of your own mind. Feynman did this obsessively. Not because he was born with more horsepower, but because he never let confusion sit in the shadows. He dragged it into the light and poked it until it made sense. Most people fear looking slow, so they pretend. They memorize answers and hope no one asks for the reasoning behind them. But here's the catch. Real speed comes from being willing to look slow now so you can be unstoppable later. Every time you admit, I don't get it yet, you lay the foundation for understanding that lasts. That's how you outpace the so-called geniuses who just sprint on the surface. But here's the error everyone makes. They confuse speed with progress. They think the fastest way through a maze is to run. But Feynman would stop, climb a ladder, and look at the maze from above. That's the difference. He wasn't afraid to pause, to ask the dumb questions, to break things down until the path was obvious. The irony? That pause is what made him faster in the long run. So, The new model is this. Speed is the shadow of depth. The deeper you dig, the faster you actually move when it counts. This isn't just a trick for exams. It's a philosophy for any challenge. Career, creativity, science, life. Be relentless in pursuit of the real answer, not the convenient one. Don't let your ego rush you past confusion. Let confusion become your compass. Feynman called this intellectual honesty. It's the courage to say, I don't know, and the discipline to keep asking until you do. It's not about collecting facts. It's about building a mental map so detailed that you can navigate any terrain, even the ones you've never seen before. If this video turned one gear in your mind, the next will spin the whole engine. Subscribe for the next mind shift and join the few who study to understand, not just to pass. Because once you see learning this way, you'll never go back to the old model. You'll become the architect of your own intelligence, one honest question at a time.